Hey there, Squatch friends. Come on by and sit by the fire and hear about this encounter. It's the Stalker from the abandoned mine. Many years ago, spelunking was one of my dangerous hobbies, but not normal caves. Dilapidated, abandoned subterraneous mines. I've come across some pretty interesting things, though. Old rail carts on track, helmets with old lights on them. It never worked, though. Lanterns, control rooms, they were pretty cool, but I wouldn't touch nothing in there. Along with machinery, and yes, there's even been wooden boxes of dynamite and blasting caps. Now that's scary, because when it comes to that kind of stuff, the condensation on them alone could be set off by vibration, and that could be very devastating. I've also had an entrance collapse while I was in there, and it took me hours, hours, to find another way out. I don't do mines anymore, but that isn't the reason why. In 2016, my wife and I wanted to move to a better area due to the fact that she was pregnant with my daughter, and at the time, the neighborhood that we lived in, we just couldn't see raising kids there. You know, it was a bad area. We found a place about 5 miles away that was north, so I wasn't too far away from my mom, but far enough away from the bad areas. It was a small 2-bedroom house, 1 bathroom, living room, kitchen, full basement, 6.5 acres, and about a half acre of it was fenced off. Perfect for the dogs. And to top it off, it had a natural spring there as well. For the time being, I thought to myself, this could be heaven. But, as normally, I was wrong. Being an avid fisherman at the time, my fishing buddy, Mr. Weasel, gave me the idea to dig a pond and have it naturally fed by the spring to store live bait for long term for our fishing trips. He even offered to help dig, so I thought he had an excellent idea, and I said, okie dokie. Mind you, at this point, I haven't fully explored the full property because some of it was on a wooded ledge going over a hill into the woods. Before digging, I went online to check zoning. I didn't want to hit a line or anything like that. There was no lines, but I did learn something. I learned that the property was sitting on an ancient indigenous native silver mine that was taken over by settlers whom enslaved the natives and forced them to work the mines to their deaths, practically. I also found out that over 3/4 of the property was a native burial ground, most not even given the decency to carry out burial rituals due to difference in spiritual beliefs. Basically, a slave mine genocide. The thought of an abandoned mine tickled me to death though, but knowing it was silver, that just enticed me even more. I wanted to find out where I can get in it, but one project at a time. Weasel and I got a hole dug. The layers of clay were so thick that we had no need for a liner. We trimmed the outside of the pond by stacking large flat river rock slabs, and when it was done, it was beautiful. It held life for the bait fish, frogs, moss, and many flowers bloomed around it. That was my wife's finishing touch. She always adds the flowers and makes it nice. Deer and other wildlife always stop by to have a drink. I loved it. It was a great pond. Now that the pond project was done and out of the way, it's time to explore. From the top of the long, steep driveway, I went into the wood line looking for an opening, but none up there. Now for the lower side. The driveway went around the right side of the house, being north going around the back corner, and then it went back around and connected from an intersection, but it was a dirt mining trail that went for a few miles. So across from the right or north side of the house, there was a fence blocking the ledge of an overhang. That was my next spot to look. I went into the tree line and I was greeted with a really big slope. I held on to the trees and roots and tried to make sure that I didn't slip, because if I did, surely I'd get hurt. As I came down, I felt level and instantly confused. A tad creeped out by what I saw. All over the ground there was like kids' shoes and dolls. The shoes varied in sizes from times and eras. They were old. Some were like 1930s up to the 1960s in styles, both boy and girls, but it was all kid sizes. The dolls were a variety between some tattered clothes, old Barbies with no clothes, interested in dirt, baby dolls that used to be open, their closed eyes, but now that one eye is closed and the other one stays open. There was a bunch of broken porcelain dolls. I don't know. To me, it was pretty creepy, huh? I'm pretty sure you'd agree. Under the long rock shelf ledge, there was 7 openings, but I was only able to fit in one of them. Upon entering, everything seemed normal till about 15 or so feet in, where I came around a corner. More really old kids' shoes. Leather warped with fungus growing over it. The wooden soles were rotten. There was more pieces of broken porcelain dolls laying scattered in the rocks and dust along the narrow walls. Thank God I never go into a mine without chem light. I slid them across the floor because you'll never know where there's going to be a vertical shaft. I slid it in, and less than 10 feet away from me, there it was, that vertical shaft drop-off. I could barely see the glow as I looked down. That's a hell of a drop, I thought to myself, as I shined my light down into the dark abyss. About 7 or so feet down the shaft, there was another connecting tunnel. I angled my light to get a better view, and I caught a glint in my eye. Raw silver ore chunks right there, right out of the wall. It was a joining tunnel, and it looked like the vein. And I could fit in there, but I wouldn't have much of a height clearance. This told me that I needed to go get prepared and then come back at a later time for a better descent. I really wanted to go down at that point, but in all honesty, I didn't have what I needed on me. As I was turning around to head back, I heard the strangest sound coming out of that hole though. Something kind of familiar, but in a way not on point. I was, to my best way of saying, a clicking sort. It was a mix between the sound of the Predator from the movies, or perhaps it was similar sound of a small stick running across a corrugated piece of wood. It was brief, but loud enough to make an echo. It startled me, and I whipped around, shining my light, but to see nothing. I wrote it off as a possibility being some type of a bat, and I started to head back out of the mine, following my chalk arrows out. The sound lingered in the back of my mind, though, and sort of had me freaked out, and I kept having an overwhelming feeling that I was being followed and watched. But still, nothing was there. When exiting the mine, I climbed up the rock shelf, was pulling myself up. I had an unexplainable fear come over me, and I just wanted out of that spot and to come back into the house. I barely slept that night at all. All I could do was think about that tunnel. The next day, I got up, got all my gear together, and most importantly, I had my trusty rock hammer packed too. When I got to the vertical shaft, I geared down and anchored my safety equipment and slowly worked my way down into that tunnel. I shined my headlamp in and saw that it was a narrow passage that came to a T not far in, but it was tight. First, my bag was pushed in, and then I climbed and wiggled my way in right behind it. I was able to crawl on my hands and knees. That was about it, clearance-wise. Right there in the wall, there was an exposed part of the silver vein. I used my hammer's back end to chip away and cut chunks out of the raw ore from the walls. Periodically, I stopped, because I could swear I was hearing that noise again. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, because it was echoing through the tunnels. At this point, I was really getting freaked out, and I really did not feel safe moving backwards blindly, but I was unable to just turn around. It was narrow. I put my rock hammer back in the bag, now that I had about 20 pounds of raw silver in it, and started pushing it forward in front of me so that I could make a 3-point turnaround at the T when I got to the end. I flung my bag around the corner to the right. As I moved around that corner, I grabbed the bag and pulled it back. As I backed into the left of the T, then I flopped the bag back onto the tunnel. Indeed, it was facing the right way to go out. I heard that sound again as I was turning myself in a position to get back into the tunnel, and I looked far down the narrow passage that I had just used to turn around. I saw green eyes shine. It was accompanied by more of that sound, in which changed from the sound to a wild boar sound. I was so frightened that I almost panicked, and I crawled, pushing my bag in front of me. When I got to the vertical shaft, I used a carabiner to hook my drag handle of my bag to it, and I worked my way up. As I was working my way out of the mine, I began to notice that all of my chalk markings on the walls that were telling me the way out were rubbed off. Thankfully, it wasn't very far in, and I already knew the way. The whole time I was working my way out, I heard both the clicking and the wild boar sounds. Finally, I was out, and I made it back to the house. What the hell kind of animal just scared me out of there? I gotta go find out. The next morning, I took some leftovers. There was fruit, vegetables, and raw meat, and I left it at the entrance of the mine. I placed all of it about 5 feet away, directly in front of the opening, and I dumped a layer of flour all around. My goal was to leave it and see the next day if there was, one, any of it taken, two, what food did it take, and finally, what type of prints would it have left in the flour. The morning after, I went to check. All the raw meat was still there, and yes, there was marks on the flour too, but no prints. Just a series of marks as if something was able to reach out without stepping a foot out. Just odd claw marks. Nothing more. Not bare either. I was eerily stumped. One night I was taking the trash up to the burn pile. I got it all lit up, and I started back down the hill towards the house when I noticed something at my pond had caught my eye. There was something large and white drinking from it. The moment I shined my light in this direction, the head snapped up at me, and it stood up and was just staring at me. It was the same exact green eye shine I saw in the mine. It was about 6 foot tall, perhaps taller. Such a pale white that you could almost see the color of its organs through its skin. It was completely bald, with no features of a nose or ears. The arms seemed normal from the elbows to the shoulders, but from the elbows to the wrist was extremely noticeably elongated. The hands seemed larger and the fingers seemed to be way abnormally long. I pulled a machete out and I made it known that if it were to attack me that I would at least try to kill it. I wouldn't go down without a fight. I slowly sidestepped to the house, keeping my defensive position strong. As I got closer to the house, it got down on its hands and feet and slowly crawled off as if it was natural to it, keeping its eye on me. When I opened my door to tell my wife to look out the window, it was there, and I turned my head for a second, it was gone. I looked and sounded like a fool telling my wife just for it not to be there. After that night, everything could take a wrong turn. The following night, I was sitting outside enjoying a fire and I heard a whistle come from the woods. Not thinking, I whistled back. It was returned with another, and this went back and forth for about 45 seconds or so. Then it stopped. I didn't hear anything else until late that night, when I was awakened by something hitting my bedroom window. I looked out and seen nothing, so I grabbed a weapon and a flashlight, and I went outside. I couldn't find anyone out there, but when I scanned the tree line, there was that bright green eye shine. I went back inside the house, and that was it for the night. It got really hard getting to sleep, and eventually I did. Night after night, I would hear it either tapping or scratching at the windows, or crawling around even on the roof. Night after night, my sleep would lessen more and more. I felt like I was going crazy, and I sounded like I was going crazy, trying to explain to my friends. The one night, I forgot about the occasion. I had some friends over for a bonfire. At the top of the yard, we had a bunch of junk wood that my sister's husband had nowhere to dump. That fire was huge, plus we had two smaller campfire-sized ones too. One of my friends had pointed over the brush line towards the mine and said, "Hey, there's something white over there." It was sitting in the bushes with its back towards us. At first, I didn't see it, so I whistled. Fast as hell, its head swung around in the green eye shine. It made a squealing sound like a frightened pig and tore down hell through the direction towards the mine. That was also the last night that we ever saw our cat Mickey. Several days later, I found small sections of skin and fur that fit Mickey's coat, not even enough to determine it was our cat's little remains or not. About a week had gone by and it has been quiet. I still haven't seen it either. Yay, it's over, so I thought. As soon as I thought things were going to be normal again, I started having a reoccurring dream, and it felt like lucid dreaming. It felt like it was real, but the only things that changed were these dreams was the clothing my wife and I were wearing and where the dogs were sleeping on the bed. Clothing in the dreams were always what we were wearing when we went to bed that evening, adding to the realism. Here's the dream though. I'd open my eyes because I'm hearing that clicking sound, but I can't move nor speak. It's like I'm stuck in bed, but I can still look around. Dogs are all sleeping, my wife's sleeping, and I can't call to her. Nothing comes out. Then it's there in the room. It's with us. It's watching us. It's like it's trying to watch us sleep. It crawls over to the stairs into my eyes and the clicking starts to get louder. This dream happened 3 to 4 days a week. My personality started changing. I was always depressed. I got to the point that I became extremely fixated on suicide. I wanted to stop this haunting in my dreams, and I felt like that was the only way to stop it would be to self-terminate. My life was falling apart. I was going nuts over this cave creature getting inside of my head somehow. One evening I woke up around 2:45 a.m. to go to the bathroom. After that I went to the refrigerator to get a small drink of milk out the jug when my wife was sleeping and she wouldn't chew me out for it. Then I heard the step creak that went up from the kitchen to the basement. I quickly ran to inspect and there it was. It let out that pig-like shriek and ran down the steps and it exited the basement door. The door was removed from the hinges, meaning it tapped the pins and took the door off to enter. Literally, it removed the door. Also, the lock flap on the outside of the door was removed, being pried off by removing the screws, because this was a basement door. The padlock on the outside of the door was still locked. It literally broke in. That's when it hit me. We hardly ever went in the basement, and that door was always assumed padlocked. These weren't dreams. This thing had been breaking into my home and doing something to me. I felt that I could only say that it was a form of draining my life force or something far more nefarious. At the same night, a tree fell on our house and punched a hole in the roof. We ended up moving out of there, and I'm glad, not only to be away from that thing, but within a month of us moving out, a large pine tree in the yard fell on top of that house and went the whole way through the kitchen, through part of the living room, a bedroom, and went the whole way down to the basement. Cut the house in half. Since moving, my mental status has gone back to normal, and I no longer want to hurt myself, and I've been actually living a good life. Have you had a cryptid encounter? Or a creepy experience with a haunting or a ghost or something paranormal? And you want to hear it on this show? Just email me, squatchtopic.pa@gmail.com.